Shock is a state of impending circulatory failure due to disparity between circulating blood volume and vascular bed volume. The circulating blood volume decreases and the vascular bed volume increases. Therefore, the disparity. Now, what decreases the circulating? By the word circulating, you have the cardiogenic shock, which can be because of pericardial causes, myocardial causes, or endocardial causes. The pericardium means cardiac tamponade. The heart doesn't find a place to expand, so the end diastolic filling of blood reduces. So if there's no blood to pump at the end of the diastole, the systole will pump no blood. Then there can be myocardial infarction or cardiomyopathy, which is the weakness of the cardiac muscle that doesn't allow the heart to pump sufficiently. In the endocardial region, you can have stenosis like mitral stenosis. In the aorta, you can have a dissecting aneurysm or coarctation, or you can have an embolism from the left atrium or from the periphery which has blocked the pulmonary vein, which is called as pulmonary embolism, which can cause severe shock. Now, the characteristics of any cardiac reason of shock is a raised central venous pressure. Then, after circulating, we come to blood volume. The blood volume means hypovolumic shock. This is due to blood loss, internal or external hemorrhage, plasma loss, for example, burns, or fluid loss like dehydration due to vomiting and diarrhea in gastroenteritis. Then there is a shock which is called a sequestration shock, where a part of the circulation takes the blood from the arteries but doesn't return it through veins. This sequestration shock we will study in greater detail in the subsequent slides. So, this is what we have said. We classify shock into decreased circulating blood volume due to a cardiogenic reason, pericardial cardiac tamponade, the myocardial infarction or cardiomyopathy, the endocardial stenosis, dissecting aneurysm, coarctation, or embolism, and in all these causes, the central venous pressure will increase. Then the hypovolumic, which is due to internal or external hemorrhage or blood loss, plasma loss in burns, fluid loss in dehydration due to vomiting and diarrhea, example gastroenteritis, and sequestration shock. In all these types of shock, the CVP, the central venous pressure, will decrease. Then increasing vascular bed volume is seen in anaphylactic shock, where it is because of allergy or hypersensitivity type 1 reaction, where histamine and histamine-like substances cause generalized severe vasodilatation suddenly, and the patient goes into shock. Then septicemic shock, where in bacterial infection, severe bacterial infection, there is vasodilatation. The neurogenic shock, where in pain there is vasodilatation. And finally, the sequestration shock. Let us understand the sequestration shock. Now you see, if there is intestinal obstruction, the intraluminal pressure proximal to the obstruction would increase, which is shown here as increased P. This would obliterate the veins because the venous pressure is less. So arteries will keep on pumping blood, but the veins would not return. This can happen in mesenteric vascular thrombosis also. So there's a part of circulation in the intestine which is taking blood but not returning it. And thus the venous return falls and the patient goes in shock. Then this ultimately would cause uh, intraluminal hemorrhage into the artery, into the lumen of the intestine, and that will increase the pressure further, and ultimately the pressure will become so much that the arteries will also be blocked. That segment of the bowel will become ischemic, it will perforate, and it will cause peritonitis. So this is the pathology of shock and intestinal obstruction, which you must be familiar with. As soon as the tissue perfusion decreases, there are two enemies that face each other. One is the compensatory mechanism, which wants to save all, and one is the vicious cycle, which only wants to save itself. So the results of impending circulatory failure and shock depend on the fight between compensatory mechanisms, which are trying to promote individual sacrifice to save the whole, and the highly individualistic vicious cycle, which is demanding its oxygen at all costs, even if the rest of the system goes to hell. Anoxia pushes the vicious cycle. Therefore, oxygen would save. So, till compensatory mechanisms don't allow the shock to show up, it is called as latent or hidden shock. It is this stage that the shock should be diagnosed, and you will diagnose shock in this stage by suspicion. More suspicious you are, safer you are as a doctor. Then the compensatory mechanisms show the shock but can reverse it. This is called as reversible shock. But then they can't reverse it without external help, and this is called as irreversible shock. So if you wait to diagnose shock by a racing pulse, a cold clammy skin, a gasping patient and a dilated fixed pupil, you have diagnosed shock only for post-mortem purposes. So you have to diagnose shock by suspicion. And so important is suspicion that there was an American army saying in the Vietnam War, they were the orders, put in a drip first, see the pulse later. So now we are looking at the compensatory mechanisms in shock. What should compensatory mechanisms do? They should increase the cardiac output, and they should promote a system that will use that cardiac output economically or well. So what does the cardiac output depend on? It depends on the venous return, the force of cardiac contraction, and the heart rate. Now venous return, how to increase venous return? Veins have 3200 cc of the total 5 liters of blood in the human body. This is called as the venous capacitance. As the veins collapse under sympathetic influence, up to 60% of this capacitance is returned back to the heart. Similarly, splenic and hepatic sinusoids will collapse and yield about 300 and 500 cc's of blood respectively. The third system that comes into play is the renal glomerular ischemia. The macula densa cells in the juxtaglomerular apparatus near the glomerulus release renin, which becomes angiotensin 1, which helps in selective vasoconstriction through the ACE receptors, and angiotensin 2, which releases aldosterone, a mineralocorticoid from the adrenal medulla, and this retains sodium. With sodium is retained obligatory volumes of water. The blood volume increases, and this combats the hypovolemia and helps in the compensatory mechanisms of shock. Therefore, it is a kidney shutdown in shock, and a dropping urine output indicates this mechanism to be operative. So one way to increase the cardiac output is by increasing venous return. The second is increase the force of cardiac contraction, and that is by beta adrenoceptors in the heart, and this is called as the force of cardiac contraction. The third is increase heart rate, but increased heart rate would help only up to 120 beats per minute. Then the venous return would drop so much because the heart is not able to fill completely, and this decreased diastolic filling would not let it pump sufficient blood per beat. So this increased heart rate more than 120, it actually increases shock rather than decreasing it. Also, since the heart feeds itself in diastole, in the systole, the intramuscular pressure is much higher than arterial pressure. So in the systole, the heart is not feeding itself. So in diastole, the time decreases as the heart beats faster and faster, and this reduced diastolic time doesn't allow the heart to feed itself, and the heart muscle becomes ischemic, and the force of cardiac contraction would decrease. The third way that loss of blood, internal hemorrhage of blood is prevented, because if there is anoxia, the endothelium leaks the blood and the plasma into the extracellular fluid. This stability can be brought about by steroids, which prevent this extravascular viscation demanded by anoxia, and therefore steroids are also released to stabilize the vascular membrane. So all these are ways to increase the cardiac output. Then we talk about the economics of cardiac output. So by selective vasodilatation in the heart, lung, kidney and brain, and collapsing of all other vessels through the sympathetic system receptors, the renin-angiotensin mechanism, and the vasodilatory and vasoconstrictory material secreted by the liver, the cardiac output sustains the heart, lung, kidney and brain at the cost of ischemia of all other tissue. So this is the mechanism, compensatory mechanism of economizing the cardiac output. Then we talk of the vicious cycle. When the tissue perfusion decreases, there is anoxia, the respiration becomes anaerobic, and the anaerobic respiration yields lactic acid from pyruvic acid. This is indicated by increased lactic dehydrogenase. This system produces profuse vasodilatation, which doesn't respond to anything. Then the endothelium becomes leaky and there is hemorrhage and effusion in the extracellular fluid. And this is because of the membrane leak. The steroids act at this point and prevent this membrane leak to some extent. All this causes pooling of blood in the periphery. The venous return decreases, and as such, this has caused poor organ performance, and all this leads to more decrease in tissue perfusion, and this the vicious cycle continues round and round till you reach the stage of irreversible shock. So the two enemies, the compensatory mechanism and the vicious cycle. If you have understood them well, then you will be able to manage patients of shock intelligently. So here is what you have to do. You have to diagnose shock by suspicion, not by a racing pulse, a cold clammy skin, a gasping patient and dilated fixed pupil, because if you do so, you have diagnosed shock for post-mortem purposes only. The second thing is stop bleeding as soon as possible to prevent shock. Prevention is always better than cure. Then put in a drip first, see the pulse later. Follow the American Army order for patients for victims of the Vietnam War. Then replace blood by grouped cross-matched blood. If not blood, then plasma. If not plasma, then plasma expander. If not that also, then ringer lactate or Lomodex. Lomodex will improve tissue perfusion. Then fight anoxia, give oxygen, understand the LDH mechanism, the lactic dehydrogenase mechanism, which is causing havoc in the peripheral tissue. Keep the patient warm, treat the cause of shock in time. Keep a watch on oxygenation. Keep a watch on oxygenation, and that the best method now is pulse oximeter. Look for sodium, potassium, urea, creatinine. Look for renal failure. Look for LDH, which represents the anoxic status of the tissue. Take care of the intake output. Monitor the pulse, blood pressure, EKG, respiratory rate, and the central venous pressure. Remember, a raised CVP means cardiogenic and a lowered CVP means hypovolumic. Then look for breathing. If it is deep and fast, it indicates acidotic breathing or Kussmaul's breathing. And there you have to give soda bicarb, because if you don't give it, there will be a cardiac arrest. Then prevent infection by giving prophylactic antibiotic. And you have to keep on looking out for organ failure and manage it when it occurs.